The story opens with a man named Charles. He had no job and no money. The bank was preparing to evict him from his own home. Charles's friend Ricky told him about a construction site where he was already working. When Charles said, maybe, another friend, Clarence, jumped in and said, "You're not some kind of prince who doesn't have to work and somehow everything just keeps running fine." From then on, Charles started calling Clarence, Clara Baby. Clarence hated the nickname. He told him, "Don't call me that." But Charles kept teasing him. Clarence got angry, and Ricky had to step in between them to stop a fight. As Clarence stormed off, he muttered, "I hope they take your house." The very next morning, a man named Aniston appeared outside Charles's house. He wanted to rent the basement, but Charles told him the house wasn't for rent or sale. Aniston replied, "Maybe this is a bad time. Call me if you ever change your mind." Charles's house had run out of groceries, and he didn't have a cent left to buy food. His car was out of gas. He hadn't gotten that construction job either. Talking to a bank employee named Laney Brown, Charles said, "There's so much construction happening, but no one will hire me." Laney replied, "We've been patient with you ever since your mother passed, but you've gone too far." Laney explained the bank had an offer to buy his home and clear the debt, and maybe that was for the best. Desperate, Charles called his Aunt Peaches asking for money to pay off the mortgage. The house had been in their family for 8 generations. His mother, his aunt, all had been born there. But Aunt Peaches refused to give him another cent. With no other option, Charles contacted Aniston again. He opened the basement for him, only to find a dead dog lying there. That night, Charles went into his late mother's room and sat remembering her. The next day, Ricky came by to take a look at the basement. He noticed a lot of antique furniture and said, "You should talk to a proper antique dealer." Ricky knew one, though she took 10% commission. The dealer, named Nars Gully, arrived soon after and began examining the antiques. Narcissus discovered several tribal masks she hadn't expected to find at all. Charles's ancestors must have brought them from West Africa. These would be the first of their kind ever discovered in that part of the state, proof of something Narcissus had been arguing for years. But just then, Charles heard strange noises coming from upstairs. Narcissus asked, "Are you all right?" Charles said, Yeah. He told her he didn't really know much about the antiques, he just needed money. Narcissus assured him that aside from the masks, he'd still get a fair amount for the other items, but antique dealers often take 3 to 4 months to respond. As she left, Narcissus told Charles to keep those masks close. Later, Charles went upstairs to investigate the sounds. He pressed his ear to a closed door, listening. A short while later, Aniston called back. He was ready to rent the basement, offering an unbelievable $65,000 for 65 days. Charles could hardly believe it, but that was Aniston's deal: $10,000 up front as a deposit, $25,000 when he moved in, and the final payment at the end, all in cash. Charles couldn't tell anyone about it. Soon after, Ricky and his girlfriend Bethany stopped by the house. Charles sat downstairs, hearing their voices echo from above. Distracted by the noise, he picked up one of the antique masks and placed it over his face. Moments later, his eyes flicked open, and Bethany had come downstairs. She saw him and asked, "What happened, Charles? Why are you still here?" Bethany had known Charles since childhood. She knew that after his mother's death, Charles had stayed behind to care for his mean Uncle Brent. But now she couldn't understand why he was still trapped here, even after everyone else had passed away. Charles replied, "After Brent, I just got stuck." The next day, deliveries arrived for the basement, furniture and supplies that Aniston had sent, along with the first payment. Charles took the money straight to the bank, paid off what he owed, and stopped the foreclosure. He refueled his car and restocked his home with supplies. Then, on November 1st, Aniston arrived. Charles picked him up from the train station. Aniston would be staying in the basement for the next 65 days. Charles had no idea why. That evening, the two shared bourbon together. Aniston asked him about his life. Charles replied, "You know my name. You know where I live. That's enough." He added that he was the last one left in his family. Everyone else was gone. He asked Aniston what kind of work he did. Aniston didn't describe it clearly. Instead, he explained it in a complicated, almost cryptic way, saying, "Imagine there are diamonds buried under someone else's house, and only you know they're there. That's where I come in. I locate hidden wealth and then acquire the property that holds it, for which I receive a stipend. After saying this, Aniston handed Charles $25,000, and Charles went back upstairs. But the next morning, when he came down, he was stunned by what he saw. Aniston had built a jail cell in the basement. He told Charles that he was going to remain locked inside it for the next 65 days. During this time, he said, "I'll need you to bring me my meals." Charles thought the whole thing was incredibly strange. Aniston explained that throughout history, many people had chosen to separate themselves from the world: monks, hermits, seekers. But Charles told him to leave immediately. If anyone ever saw a white man locked in a cage inside his basement, it would spell serious trouble for him. Aniston calmly replied that he was there by his own choice. He made another offer: if after 2 weeks Charles still wanted him gone, he would leave. But if Charles allowed him to stay, he'd double the final payment. He couldn't go to a hotel, he said, because too many people knew him. He wouldn't be able to find the solitude he needed there. Then Aniston handed Charles the key to his cage. Charles secured the basement tightly, covering all the windows so no one could see inside. That evening, he brought Aniston food and other essentials. Aniston asked for some books; he had brought many to read. He referred to the whole experience as a spiritual journey. But that night, Charles began hearing unsettling noises. He dreamt of someone climbing his stairs, 2 hands gripping the steps, reaching upward. He woke up in a cold sweat. The next day, Charles tried to look up Aniston online. Outside the library, he bumped into Ricky, who mentioned that Clarence had spotted him at the train station. Charles confirmed it, saying he'd been thinking of leaving town. Ricky invited him to a party at Clarence's house later that week. Afterward, Charles went back to the basement and asked Aniston, "Doesn't anyone wonder where you are?" Aniston replied, "We all disappear, Charles. Sometimes we bury ourselves in work. Sometimes something unexpected happens. One day you simply don't come back, and people worry for a while. They call the police. Some are so close to their loved ones that they die without them. But most of us don't. Most of us adapt." Charles then asked, "What makes a man lock himself up and spend so much money to do it?" Aniston said, "Money stopped being interesting to me a long time ago. And I sincerely hope you're enjoying spending mine, Charles." Later, Charles brought the ancestral masks down from upstairs. He asked Aniston about them. Aniston scraped one slightly, revealing that it was made of gold. The very next day, Charles put on his father's old suit and took the masks to Nars. He told her that his mother always used to say their family had never been enslaved, something he had never believed. But seeing those golden masks now, he finally did. Charles proposed an idea to Narcissus: they could become partners, travel around in a van, and charge people to see all the artifacts from the basement. But Narcissus disagreed. She told him that doing so would turn his heritage into merchandise, something she could never support. So Charles left and went to a club. There, he met a woman. They went to her car together. But as soon as she stepped out, Charles began feeling strange. He saw a dog standing in front of him, and then, just like that, it vanished. He caught a glimpse of someone behind him for an instant. Panic surged through him. His breathing grew short. He stumbled out of the car and went straight back to Aniston. Aniston greeted him coldly. "You forgot to bring my food today. I don't pay you for this." But Charles demanded, "Tell me why you're really here. I know you're some kind of criminal. Is that why you're hiding?" Aniston admitted, yes, but insisted no one was looking for him. He was there of his own will. He refused to reveal anything more. Instead, he said, "From now on, if you're busy anywhere, come here first. You have to feed your dog." That night, while brushing his teeth, Charles noticed something strange in his mouth. Beneath the skin of his face, he saw glints of gold. Then came a noise from outside. A dark figure stood behind him. The next morning, Aniston asked him to bring a new light; the previous one had burned out. So Charles went to see his friends. He told them the bank manager had accused him of taking money from the drawer, money that Charles had, in fact, taken. And that was the reason Charles never got the job at the construction site. Charles said, "Up until now, I thought I was just a good person with bad luck, but that's not true, is it? So Clarence offered to help Charles with the mortgage, but as Charles was leaving, he apologized to him. He said, "I was jealous of you." On the drive home, Charles turned off his headlights, closed his eyes, and took his hands off the steering wheel. But when he did, his car struck a deer standing in the road. The deer died instantly. Charles sat beside it and began to cry. He returned to Aniston and told him to get out. "I don't want you here." That's when Aniston finally revealed the real reason he had come. His first job in accounting had been in Tyrann, and to prove his loyalty, his employers had ordered him to kill a man. Aniston obeyed. Charles asked, "So that's why you're here? But why my house?" Then he asked, "Was he black?" He realized that Aniston was trying to serve his own sentence for killing a black man by imprisoning himself in the basement of a black man's home. Charles shouted angrily, "You're just a crazy white man who thinks that because you're paying me, I'll do whatever you say." Aniston calmly replied, "But you need the money." Then Aniston laid out Charles's entire life story in front of him. He knew everything, his friends' names, his college days, everything. He even knew that Charles had worked at the Harbor Union but had embezzled $433 from his drawer, an amount too small to lose one's job and dignity over. And it turned out, Aniston was the one who had made the offer to the bank to buy the house, so that the bank would pressure Charles to vacate it. Under that pressure, Charles would eventually agree to rent the basement to Aniston. Hearing this, Charles moved to unlock the jail door, but Aniston said, "Look, whether I stay here or not, your situation doesn't change." So Charles snapped, "Fine. Tonight you're the prisoner, and I'm the warden." He turned off the basement light and went back upstairs. The next morning, he came down and told Aniston, "Everything from now on is a privilege, even this light. And to earn it, you'll have to answer my questions correctly." Aniston had only one right: he could ask to be released anytime, and Charles would let him go exactly 96 hours after his request. Charles was asserting his power now. Aniston said, "Fine. But after every 3 of your questions, I'll ask one of my own." Charles began, "Did you murder someone?" Aniston said, "No. I killed him, shot him, following orders from legitimate government officials." Then Aniston turned the question back on Charles. "And you? Have you killed anyone?" Charles said no and walked away. Outside, his neighbor asked, "You all right, Charles?" But Charles didn't answer. The next day, he went to see Narcissus. He apologized to her one last time. Narcissus told him it was fine, she just didn't like him selling off his family's possessions, but as a professional, she'd still get him a good deal for them. That night, when Charles went to the basement, he saw a massive figure inside the cage instead of Aniston, someone too large to fit inside it. Then he realized he himself was locked in the cell. But it was only a dream. The next day, he spat into a cup of coffee and handed it to Aniston. Charles asked, "Why did you choose my house?" Aniston replied that there were several reasons, none of which Charles would like. He began explaining how white people talk about black people like Charles when no one else is listening. That was why, Aniston said, he had to imprison himself in a black man's home. He had chosen Charles specifically because he was alone, no one would miss him. He was buried under debt. Aniston called Charles the perfect failure of their race. Hearing this, Charles exploded with anger, turned off Aniston's light for 4 days, and left him in darkness. Later, Narcissus came to visit him. She brought a promising proposal. She asked, "Would you be open to sponsoring an African American museum?" Narcissus wanted to display both Charles's artifacts and her own shop's pieces there. To help solve his money problems, she would charge admission fees. That way, the artifacts would stay in Charles's possession, and he could still earn income. Charles smiled and began jokingly telling Narcissus the names he had given the masks. As they talked, the two grew closer, until Narcissus suddenly heard screams coming from somewhere nearby. Charles brushed it off, saying, "It's just a fox or something." But it wasn't. It was Aniston. Charles quickly sent Narcissus away. When he went down to the basement the next day, Aniston said, "Thank you, Charles. My time here has begun." The truth was, the people Aniston had killed were now coming to him in the darkness. He hadn't taken just one life, he had taken many. Once, he had even placed a 9-month-old baby in front of a dog on someone's orders. Aniston had made a fortune doing this kind of work. But, he added quietly, he had also saved thousands of lives. I'm only a tool. These things would have happened even without me. Charles could not understand anything Aniston was saying. Aniston said that Charles had also begun to enjoy giving pain to people. Aniston pleaded with Charles not to lock him in the darkness again, but Charles turned off the light. He left and went to Clarence's party. His friend Ricky had proposed to his girlfriend for marriage. So even while sitting at the party, Charles began seeing that same dog. Charles ran back to his house. Inside his own house, it felt as if someone was there. Charles's TV was on. He was watching people's deaths on the TV. Charles touched the TV and blood came onto his hands. He saw the dog eating that deer. Charles went and hid under his bed. There he started seeing his dead uncle. He had come to beat Charles. He used to beat Charles in childhood too. Charles ran away and went to the ocean. While drowning, he saw a woman in the distance who was probably his mother. Charles headed back toward his house. On his way, he looked toward his neighbor's house. The next day, Charles made a pie and took it to his neighbor. His mother used to make this pie. Charles's neighbor had been sick for a long time, but no one had come to see her for 3 years. Charles was the first. From there, Charles went to a room in his house where his uncle had also been lying sick. Charles began crying seeing him. Charles felt his mother's hand on his shoulder. All of this was only Charles's hallucinations. Charles went to the basement to Aniston. Aniston was in a very filthy state. He attacked Charles. Charles said, "We both will die down here." Charles asked, "Tell me who you are. What happens to you in the dark?" He asked if Aniston Bennett was his real birth name. Aniston's birth name was Tamal Noos. He didn't know his parents. His mother, Maria Noos, was an unmarried Greek woman. His father's name was Tamal. His nationality was Turkish, but Aniston never met his father and his mother died giving birth to him. Aniston removed his blue eye lenses here. When he grew up, he gave himself a name. He took the Bennett name from a powerful British family. Charles said, "Then you could be anything. Who knows? Maybe your father wasn't Turkish but Indian or like us." To which Aniston said, "No, I am white as a sun." So Charles gave Aniston a bath. He gave him food. Charles gave him a new light for reading. He gave him a new book from Aniston's collection. Charles finally gave his confession here. "I killed a man. I let my uncle die." Actually, after his mother's death, Charles was left alone with his uncle, taking care of the man he hated his entire life. So he stopped answering when he called. Soon his calling turned into screams. Charles waited for those screams to stop, meaning for him to die. And that is why Charles stayed stuck in this house. So, the next day, when Charles came back to the basement, Aniston had died. Through a letter, he told Charles, "I know you have many questions about both of us, but I have to take the answers with me." Aniston had wanted to die for a long time, but he had answers he needed to find first. And he found those answers when Charles started leaving him in the darkness. Aniston had left letters for his business associates and his family, asking Charles to send them, but Charles burned them. Aniston had left a red pill for Charles that could give him a fast and painless death if he ever needed it. But Charles continued his life. He turned his house into a museum. He himself began living in the cage in the basement reading books.